Hello, and thank you for joining us again at Voice of Rohingya Radio. We are a registered nonprofit coming to you from the state of Oregon in the United States of America. I would like to take some time to thank all of our listeners who allow this program to continue providing the latest news through our exclusive interviews, reports from inside the border, and reputable sources from around the world. If you would like to stay up to date with our program, you can find our weekly broadcasts every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Pacific online at youtube.com/VOR radio, or you can join our page on Facebook to find more information on our activities and past programs. It is November 16th, 2014. For Voice of Rohingya Radio, I am your host, Zach Taylor. Our top story tonight comes after United States President Barack Obama's visit to Myanmar last week, where he met with NLDP leader and Nobel Prize laureate Aung San Suu Kyi and held a private meeting with Myanmar President Thein Sein. After meeting with Sein, Obama noted the recent progress towards peace and stability in the country, saying that domestically we've seen political prisoners that have been released in an effort to end the practice of children being recruited into the army. And he added that there is a genuine prospect for a ceasefire between some of the armed groups that have been fighting in Myanmar for decades. But Obama also said the U.S. is watching how Myanmar treats religious minorities, and he stressed the need for the country's 2015 elections to be transparent, fair, and inclusive. The election was a central theme at the president's news conference with Suu Kyi in a session held at her home where she lived under house arrest for nearly 2 decades. Suu Kyi is barred from running for president by a section of Myanmar's constitution that precludes anyone from taking the high office who is either married to or the parent of a foreign national. Both of Suu Kyi's sons are British citizens, as was her late husband. Obama said he did not understand a provision that would bar somebody from running for president because of who their children are. Suu Kyi used stronger language, calling that portion of Myanmar's constitution unfair, unjust, and undemocratic. The majority of our people understand that this constitution cannot stand as it is if we want to make a true transition to democracy, she said. It is not right to discriminate against one particular citizen. The president also made a point of referring to Myanmar's Rohingya Muslim minority. As the Associated Press reports, many Rohingya had been hoping Obama would mention them during his visit, in part because their own government denies their ethnicity's existence. In a bid to draw attention to the issue, the U.S. advocacy group United to End Genocide launched a social media campaign titled #JustSayTheirName, and thousands of people have signed an online petition and tweeted photos of themselves holding placards with the slogan on social media. On the final day of the visit, Obama said, quote, "Discrimination against the Rohingya or any other religious minority does not express the kind of country that Burma over the long term wants to be." However, according to a senior U.S. official who spoke only on condition of anonymity because the official was not authorized to comment by name, Obama used the word Rohingya multiple times and did so purposefully during a private meeting with President Thein Sein on Thursday, which focused largely on the Rohingya's plight and a need for constitutional reforms ahead of the 2015 elections. But in his public opening statement, Obama did not specifically mention the Rohingya, referring only to the terrible violence in Rakhine State. During his last trip in 2012, Obama employed the word in a speech at the University of Rangoon as he pressed Myanmar's leaders to end violence and consider granting them citizenship. Supporters applauded the move, but Myanmar's government bristled. Since the start of this year, Myanmar's government has stepped up pressure on foreign officials not to use the word Rohingya. The U.S. president was also asked about domestic issues during the news conference, with questions ranging from the pending congressional votes on the Keystone XL pipeline to his plans for using executive orders to shift immigration enforcement. Washington has pressed for more change in Myanmar, where political and economic reforms launched 2 years ago seem to have stalled and taken the sheen off what was seen as a rare foreign policy achievement for Obama. But it has signaled its willingness to let the transition take shape and has avoided specific demands. In other news, the United Nations on Wednesday also urged Myanmar to protect the rights of its stateless Rohingya amid plans for a state program to issue second-class citizenship to members of the Muslim minority and expel those who don't qualify. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon told reporters that he disagreed with the plans to grant only partial citizenship rights, but stopped short of calling on Myanmar to abandon a process that could affect about 1 million people in the country's western Rakhine state. While the process is being carried out in accordance with national law, it should also be in line with international standards and guidelines, Mr. Ban said after a meeting with Southeast Asian leaders during their annual summit. Whoever is eligible to be given citizenship, I think they should be given citizenship equal to Myanmar people, without any discrimination, Mr. Ban said. For those people who may not meet the criteria, it is important that their human rights and human dignity must be fully protected. In an interview with the Irrawaddy magazine, Mr. Obama said the U.S. is, quote, deeply concerned about the treatment of the Rohingya and other Muslims in the Buddhist-majority country, and would press government officials on the importance of respecting rights for all. Mr. Bond said Myanmar was within its rights to decide citizenship criteria, but urged the government to avoid measures that could entrench the segregation, and called for easy access for international aid agencies to Rakhine. The government's plan to assess citizenship eligibility first surfaced in October when drafts of the so-called Action Plan were leaked. According to a draft seen by the Wall Street Journal, the program requires residents to prove that their families have lived in Rakhine State for more than 60 years to qualify for what would effectively be second-class citizenship. They would be classified as foreign residents, restricting their movements, right to work, and hold political office. Those who failed to do so faced detention in camps and potential deportation. You are listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio. Thanks again for listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio, a registered nonprofit out of Oregon in the United States of America, bringing you up-to-date news on the Rohingya people in Myanmar. I am your host, Zach Taylor. Chris Lua, the coordinator of the Arakan Project, said on Saturday that about 12,000 Rohingyas aboard boats have departed the western Myanmar state of Rakhine since October 15th, but have not made landfall or contacted relatives after their voyages, which normally take several days. The Arakan Project works to improve the situation of Myanmar's Rohingya population, who are subject to severe human rights violations, mainly by the government of Myanmar. Lewis said that they have become very concerned. Most of the Rohingyas heading to Malaysia transit through Thailand, where smugglers and human traffickers hold them at squalid jungle camps near the border with Malaysia until relatives pay ransom in exchange for their release. A spokesman for Thailand's Internal Security Operations Command said its army officers have been trained to prevent boats from reaching the Thai shore. He asserted that the Rohingya who left Myanmar's western state of Rakhine in the past month might be hiding on islands near Thailand, fearing that authorities would intercept them and send them back as illegal migrants. President of ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, Charles Santiago, wrote an editorial published by Asian Tribune Thursday asking why there has been no call for action from ASEAN leaders on the Rohingya. The editorial posits that perhaps that is because the Association of Nations is seen as ineffectual and centered around power and wealth only, void of any genuine ability or desire to progress human rights in the region. It hasn't been that long since the world last saw people slaughtered in the hundreds of thousands in the region. Less than 40 years ago, just one generation back, at least 1.7 million people, nearly a quarter of Cambodia's population, were killed by execution, disease, starvation, and overwork under the Khmer Rouge's brutal rule. The article said that we must make sure something like this can never happen again. But a quote from a Thai police officer in a Reuters article this week sums up the failures of the ASEAN project and how far we have to go before we become anything close to a community. A Thai district police chief was quoted as saying that hundreds of boat people that had turned up in Thai waters after fleeing persecution in Myanmar were not Thailand's responsibility. They are Muslims from Myanmar. They are illegal migrants. The head of Kapoi District Police told Reuters, "If they come in, then we must push them back. Once they have crossed the sea border into Myanmar, then that's considered pushing them back. What they do next is their problem." For more than 2 years now, ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights have been seeking to generate the political will for ASEAN leaders to step up and act as a community to protect the Rohingya from persecution and intolerable human rights violations and prevent another genocide. The failure of legislators, political leaders, and of citizens to make the demand on their leaders to take action to heal the pain of the Rohingya and avoid much, much more says a great deal about the expectations people have of their governments and of ASEAN institutions. The editorial said the concept of the ASEAN community remains nothing more than a convenient myth used by only the powerful to further their own limited agendas. Certainly, for the Rohingya, there is no such community. But if not ASEAN to step up and end this tragedy, who? The editorial concluded that it may be President Barack Obama's moral duty to make a stand, but it is our shame for having to rely on him to do so. In other news, Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu and U.S. President Barack Obama discussed regional issues including Syria and Iraq over lunch at the G20 Leaders Summit that opened in Australia on Saturday. The two discussed the latest developments in Syria and Iraq, where ISIL has captured large swaths of territory in a drive to set up a self-declared caliphate. The Prime Minister also thanked Obama for his recent remarks in Myanmar on the situation of Rohingya Muslims after Obama's call on Friday to end discrimination against Rohingya people, urging in his strongest comments on the persecuted minority that the government grant them equal rights. We at Voice of Rohingya Radio would like to take some time to commend U.S. President Barack Obama and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon for being courageous in their support of Rohingya rights during their recent visits, and we hope that their outspokenness serves as an international standard in future dialogues, to say the name of the Rohingya before they are further subjugated and marginalized and forgotten. We'd also like to thank United to End Genocide's Just Say Rohingya campaign for the moral support it may have lent the president and surely for its encouragement of the Rohingya people. You are listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio. Thanks again for listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio, a weekly news program bringing you up-to-date information about the Rohingya people in Myanmar. You can catch our broadcasts every Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time here in the United States at youtube.com/VOR Radio, or you can join our page on Facebook to find more information on the program. For Voice of Rohingya Radio, this is Zach Taylor, signing out.